Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Discussing a Murderer. This is your host, Little Jeff. And with me today, as always, is the panel. We have a special guest today here making a debut appearance on the podcast, and that is Denny. Denny, why don't you say hello?
Hello, everyone.
Denny, and then Cal, how you doing?
Hey everyone, I'm good. I'm in isolation at the moment. A family member has COVID, my son, so I've got a week off to solve a murderer.
I hope it's enough time. Big Jeff.
I don't think that's going to be enough time. I've been trying to solve it for 2 years and I haven't been able to do it. So, but Kel is a lot smarter than me. But
You
hello,
never know.
everybody. Hello, everybody. It's good to be back and looking forward to some more lively interaction.
I'm glad to have you back there, Big Jeff. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Silkman.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. And it's great to see a new panel member, Denny. Fantastic. Discussion today should be awesome.
All right. Well, we have about 15 minutes of real time left. And last episode, we didn't get through for the first time. We didn't get through a half an episode. So this is a continuation of episode 4. We're going to wrap up episode 4. And without any further ado, let's get to it.
My impression is Brendan's sort of intimidated by his mother. She's relatively, in terms of physical stature, rather petite, but has sometimes the attitude of a pit bull. She's very, what she doesn't have in physical size, she can make up with her bark.
I just wanted to make the comment. I don't know about what everyone else thinks, but don't you think it's rather inappropriate for an attorney to make a comment like that about Brendan's mother? If that's your son who's been treated in the manner that he has been treated, you want your mother to be as tenacious as possible, right? And to make comments like that, I believe are completely inappropriate. What does everybody else think?
Well, personally, I couldn't agree more. And just the nature of his comments is over the line. There's no respect there, right? I mean, you hit it on the head when you say that his his insulting of his client's mother is just he's got no business, right? He should be taking direction from her, not dismissing her. Sorry.
What she doesn't have in physical size, she can make up with her bark.
Hello.
Yeah. Did you call my attorney this morning?
I tried to get a hold of him, but he won't return my phone calls.
He gave me this piece of paper about me pleading or something.
Huh?
About me pleading guilty or something.
For you to plead guilty?
Yeah.
Brendan?
What?
That's what he gave you?
Well, he said that if I choose the plea thing, that
You can't. If you take that plea bargain, Brendan, you're saying you're guilty.
But if I go to a trial and he said it's going to be hard for the jury, to believe me if I tell the real true story.
Your attorney believes you did it.
Yeah?
Yeah. He wants to put you away, Brendan.
I want to stay in here until I'm 76 or whatever.
I know. I don't know what to tell you, Brendan. if you didn't do it, you need to take it to court. You need to take it to a trial.
Yeah.
If it's unfortunate that we didn't go through this call before the other week. Was it last week or the week before, where Brendan makes that very unfortunate call to Barb, where he has essentially been bullied into saying, "Oh yeah, well, I needed to call you and talk to you. What Stephen and I did to that girl," and just there is the example that they are filling his head with. If he doesn't do what they tell him to do, that he's going to jail for the rest of his life. And he's scared shitless of it. He's obviously scared shitless of it. And to me, that is one of the more, that other phone call is one of the more damning things for the defense. And and it's after you see interactions like this, it's obvious that Brendan is just simply getting bullied, and he's responsive to it. So that's what I have to say about that.
Yep. If I could just add, it's incredible what he said, guys. The jury won't believe the true story, and that's a real scary thing, because Brendan did tell the true story initially to everyone that he spoke to, and without a doubt, all the officers that he spoke to told him that he was lying and was withholding information. And so, when your own attorney tells you that the jury's not going to believe your story, I think that's a real serious issue.
And I just wanted to comment about Barb's saying that his lawyer doesn't believe him. Well, yes, his lawyer doesn't believe him, but his lawyer also, in my opinion, is out to get the plea deal done just to be able to lock Stephen up. So I believe he's, again, my opinion, I believe he's hand in hand with Kratz just trying to lock Stephen away.
I just wanted to echo a little bit further then on the Barb situation. When she says, if you're innocent, you go to trial. This, for me, shows that she is now in the same pocket as her son. She believes that he's innocent as well. You, as a mum, you would try to, although you want the best for your child, if you really believed your child had done it and this was the easiest and safest way for them to eventually have a life, you would consider the plea. But she's saying, no, you're fighting this. You're fighting it to the end. You're innocent. They're just trying to get you where they need you. We're not going there. That sounds like a mother that isn't in the know of this big conspiracy, that she was a part of it. No way. This is a woman that's clearly has her son's interest in heart, and she's trying to get him to do what's going to be best for Brendan, and that's fight to the end. I think that's fair that we bring that up, because a lot of people think that she wasn't on his side. Yeah, she might have made mistakes. She could have, should have, would have been in the room with or without a lawyer when he was having interviews, but that doesn't take away these moments. And these moments show she was on his side.
Yeah, I agree, Kelly, and I also agree with Denny as well. No one is going to know Brendan more or better than his own mother, Barb, right? And, we've discussed this many, many times. I sometimes wonder if the presence of Barb in the room was going to actually make any difference at all, because I still remember the words of Wiegert and Fassbender, who told Barb, oh, look, we've been doing this for a very long time, right? So in effect, they would have tried to convince Barb that Brendan was hiding things, that Brendan was in actual fact lying, etc., etc. And as a mother, hearing statements like that from law enforcement will be very, very devastating. What is even worse is the mere factor, and I agree with what Denny said, you have Brendan's attorney who's clearly working behind the scenes with Michael O'Kelly. They're working hand in hand with the state. They do believe in the guilt of Stephen, and now they're trying to come up with a plea deal for Brendan. So that's a horrible way to approach a trial where you believe that your own client is in actual fact guilty.
So, Dr. Silkman, I think you what you said really struck a chord with me when you focused on the words that Brendan used, that they're not going to believe the true story. And I wonder if Len Kaczynski actually said that to Brendan. Brendan, they're not going to believe the true story. Imagine just think about how incredibly manipulative that is, to say to someone who you think is guilty, or who you suspect, even if you only suspect they're guilty, oh, they're not going to believe the real story, Brendan. So this is what you have to do. It's just an incredibly manipulative thing to say to your client. And the fact that you have to manipulate your client in the first place is, rather than listen to what they want to do, is just, again, shows the incredible dereliction of duty.
Yeah, but not only that, they also realized pretty quickly, guys, that Brendan was in actual fact Stephen's alibi, right? Now, remember when Michael O'Kelly had interviewed Brendan initially in that room where Michael O'Kelly put out all the chatels of Teresa Horbach on the table? And I believe he also put a wooden spoon there as well, right? Which was remarkable. But when Brendan wrote his initial encounter, he wrote it as a very, very plain, simple story. And Michael O'Kelly said to him, "What's missing here, Brendan? What's missing?" And of course, Brendan had never mentioned Teresa. So in actual fact, that was the truth. And now we can see a common theme that if you go with that version of events, no one is going to believe you. Now, what type of justice system is it, guys, where you have to now admit to having done something that you have never done, only to get a lesser sentence if you deny that this event ever took place? It's simply crazy.
A lawyer, as far as I'm concerned. A lawyer is supposed to work for you.
So you would say Stephen Avery is masterminding your dismissal, basically, or your substitution?
I think that's his desire, yes.
I'm getting rid of Len for the simple reason is because he's not helping my son. I'm not doing it because of Stephen. Stephen's got a good attorney. Brendan don't. Brendan needs somebody like what Stephen's got. I'm not saying Steve.
If Brendan had someone like Stephen Scott, how much of a difference would it have made?
Personally, if I could just add my 2 cents worth, I think it would have made a significant difference, right? Because what you really need to do is to get to the bottom of the story of what actually happened to Teresa Horbach and actually pull apart Brendan's so-called recollections and the mere fact that there is no physical or forensic evidence that backs his story up, right? Whereas the approach that Len Kaczynski initially took is, my client's guilty, let's go with a plea deal and let's try and wrap this up as quickly as we can. So, you've got to have a presumption of innocence. Len Kaczynski, Michael O'Kelly never gave Brendan, their own client, that luxury, the presumption of innocence. And if I could just make a quick comment, have a look at the body language of Bobby Dassey. Isn't that remarkable?
I think if Brendan would have had a lawyer like Stephen had, you take a look at what Lynn did. Lynn waived the right to that pre-trial, which could have brought a lot of stuff forward and given the defense of Brendan a little more leg to stand on and how to go against the state's narrative. But Lynn waived that fact that we don't need to have a pretrial. Before this is all over, he's going to sign this plea deal and we'll just move on.
Yeah, Danny, that's an excellent point. That is an excellent point, because with that pre-trial, the judge can then make a decision whether there's enough, evidence to go for a trial. The fact of getting rid of that pre-trial, you don't have those presenting arguments to the judge, right? And so by giving that away, Paul Brendan was one step closer of being convicted, right? And like I said, if Brendan had proper legal representation, they really could have put up good legal arguments in the pre-trial to say, look, my client has he's recanted, there's no forensic evidence, etc., etc. But unfortunately, the way it went down, poor Brendan was handed on a platter. It's shocking to see.
Yeah, I mean, just to delineate exactly, if he had a proper attorney, there's no Michael Kelly interview. There's no follow-on interview with Wiegert and Fassbender where they, as Dr. Silkman pointed out, got him to delineate his, a quote-unquote clean story from start to finish. There's none of that. So, you just take out those two things alone, and that's a dramatic, that's a dramatic improvement. Obviously, Ken Kratz felt a need for that, that clean confession, because his original confession, the coerced confession, was just so disjointed and convoluted that anybody would look at it. But the clean version did him a more serious damage than the convoluted one. So you take that away, and I think that's as people in the panel just pointed out, that's a load off Brendan's case, right?
It takes May 13th out of the question. I mean, and how that even was able to be used in court still boggles my mind.
Bringing up a good point about how the court tends to break against Stevens. Any decision there is, it tends to break against him. And, on the other side, we call them man miracles, but these are like court place miracles, right? And and denying this, what they're going to show in just a minute in the documentary, that the judge is going to deny a lawyer change. And that's another big blow.
That's 100% correct. And it's remarkable. I wish Brendan was a little bit more forceful. Because remember, the judge was asking him all sorts of questions. Are you having hassles with your lawyer, having this and having that? I wish Brendan was a little bit more forceful, because really Kaczynski should have been thrown out then and then. And the mere fact that the judge says, look, I see no issue here. You can continue being represented by Len Kaczynski, is rather ironical, because then the judge, of course, throws out Len Kaczynski because he doesn't appear. He doesn't appear in that infamous interview on the Saturday with Brendan and Fassbender and Wiegert, and you could see the frustration on the interrogators. Right? They're basically the investigators. They're basically saying, "Well, Brendan, why did you call us here?" Because you can clearly see that Brendan was starting to recant. And I agree with Denny. How ridiculous to even play any segments of that or use any segments of that in the trial, when you consider that was the very reason why Kaczynski got thrown out. The mere fact that he allowed his own client to be questioned without the presence of himself. Simply crazy.
Stephen did anything wrong. I believe he's innocent too.
Are you requesting that your current counsel be replaced by someone else?
Yeah.
Mr. Kaczynski, do you believe that this request is his free and unfettered choice?
I'm unsure about that, Your Honor. I have received information that there has been an ongoing campaign by Mr. Dassey's co-defendant to encourage him to obtain new counsel that might be more to his co-defendant's liking.
Mr. Dassey, how do you get along with Mr. Kaczynski?
Not bad.
Does not bad mean good or what?
Yeah.
Do you guys fight when you're together?
No.
Can you talk with him?
Yeah.
Do you think he's doing what he believes to be in your best interest?
Sort of.
Hell no.
Tell me why you want to change lawyers at the
That's a pretty confronting question to ask Brendan right in front of him. Like,
some of it.
Like, yeah, like, so when you're getting asked in front of somebody, do you like them basically, and do you think they're trying to help you? How awkward is it in any day life when you're put on the spot? You know, it's really hard to say to someone in front of someone, yeah, I really don't like them, they're a piece of shit. And here he is, 16 years old, getting put on the spot in front of Len, basically asked, do you even like him? Like, are you getting along with him? Do you want him as your lawyer? Like, it's a bit confrontational, and we know Brennan's not that way inclined. So this is a really awkward situation to be putting him in. I just think that's cruel. That's more of a private matter as well. Like, could it have been a
discussion in chambers?
Yeah,
how about a discussion in chambers?
Yeah, exactly. Like, more privately, to give him a chance to express himself. Right now, he's got all these eyes and ears on him, and he's sitting right next to the guy that's not helping him. As simple as that.
And yeah, I 100% agree. And also, don't forget, Brendan had no idea of the behind-the-scenes machinations that were taking place. Right? Had Brendan had any sniff that his own attorney was working against him, I'm sure he would have brought it up in front of the judge.
I just feel that part where he said, "Do you fight with him?" As if you know, everything beneath fighting with him, anything that's still okay. Like, you have to raise it to the level of having a fight with it. Just the questions that he asks him are kind of rudimentary and kind of unfair. But go ahead, Big Jeff. What were you going to say?
Thanks, Jeff. I was just going to say, as a listener to the Stephen Avery jail calls, what I can tell you is that Len Kaczynski just lied through his teeth, and I do not recall Stephen talking to Barb, and in a way, you know, that he does not say to Barb, "Oh my God, this lawyer is gonna get us both. You need to get rid of him," right? I do not recall a single jail call where Stephen says anything, but you know, maybe Barb was complaining about the lawyer, and Steve says, "Oh, you just better get a new one." But this campaign that he's talking about by the co-defendant to you know, try and manipulate into a new lawyer, don't you think that if you say that in open court, you ought to have some evidence to back that up? That you should provide a brief to prove that, or is the you know, the recording of the jail call that he's referencing to prove that? Shouldn't there be some type of burden of proof? I'm here to say that is absolutely and totally fallacious. So.
And didn't Barb say to Stephen on the phone, "Do you got $100,000 for me, for Brendan?" So she's trying to shake him down for money and say, "You should help out with Brendan getting a new lawyer, a different lawyer." So that seed was planted from her.
Except that wasn't for Len Kaczynski. That was for that was for Brendan's very first attorney, that just happened to be distantly related to Teresa Hallbart. So he had to excuse himself. So essentially, Len's a public defender, right? But I'm pretty well convinced that neither Stephen nor anyone else would have thought that Brendan's attorney would have been in cahoots with the state. That was indeed a shock.
One last thing to say about this before we move on is when the judge is questioning Brendan, it goes back to how Brendan interacts with people and how he responds. He doesn't offer up information. He waits for someone to offer up information, and then he says yes or no. And that's what we see in the interrogations. They feed him something, and he says yes or no, and he agrees or doesn't agree. He's not saying, well, I don't like Len because he doesn't seem to listen to my opinions. I don't like him because I keep telling him I'm innocent, and he doesn't have a clear statement. He waits for the judge to feed him, and then he says yes or no.
At this point.
I think he no he that I think he thinks I'm guilty.
And that's the reason that you want to get a different lawyer?
Yeah.
I don't see or hear anything that tells me that there is an irreconcilable conflict or difference. There certainly isn't, I don't believe, any breakdown.
Isn't the fact that your lawyer thinks you're guilty, isn't that enough?
Yeah, I was just about to say that. I'm sure the other panel members are going to jump out of their seats too. I mean, here is the client, Brendan, telling the judge, my attorney thinks I'm guilty. And the judge just simply bypasses it and thinks, yeah, I see no problems.
I love how they're just like, he's shifting in his seat. You know, we see that the shifting in the seat. And I always feel like there's some funny business when people are shifting in their seats like that. Anyway, Big Jeff, you got something?
What Brendan should have said is that fuckhead went on TV and told the whole world I was guilty. When you talk about, I don't see any irreconcilable differences. He went on TV and said, well, he was influenced by them.
Brendan too.
Yeah. Oh, it's just unbelievable, right? He poisoned the jury pool against Brendan. I don't see anything wrong with that. Yeah. Thanks, Judge.
Down complete or otherwise in communication. Accordingly, I'm going to deny Mr. Dassey's motion to substitute someone for Mr. Kaczynski as his counsel.
Bunch of dirty bastards.
Dean Strang, Stephen Avery's attorney, said, and I quote, Stephen Avery is not orchestrating a campaign to get rid of Brendan Dassey's lawyer. My own sense is that the whole Dassey and Avery family is hoping that the current lawyer or some lawyer simply will defend Brendan Dassey.
I think Jeff, that really sums it up in a nutshell. It's rather bizarre, and you have to admit, it's rather bizarre that another attorney has to state the bleeding obvious, right? That you expect your own attorney to defend their client, not get their client to simply roll over and work with the state. I've never actually seen any other example of that, and it's pretty devastating. And you have to admit, everything went wrong for Brendan right from day one, which is a true tragedy.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. You know, at the end of the day, a lawyer, it's not whether your lawyer believes you're innocent or guilty. They're not allowed to use their own opinion about that. Their job is to represent you regardless. That's their job. You're hiring them, or whether it's a lawyer that you've been handed from the state, that's their job. And Dean definitely summed it all up in just that one paragraph there, saying, at the end of the day, just defend him. That's your job. Whether we believe our clients are guilty or innocent, we don't know the full story, but our job is to represent. Do that as best as you can, but you didn't even give him that chance, because like we just saw, he jeopardized his client almost immediately. He was throwing him to the wolves straight away as soon as he became a part of his case. It's absolutely revolting.
again, I just want to point out that this is a substitution of a public defender. This isn't, he doesn't have a private lawyer. He has very few options. This is one of his options to say, you know what? The guy that you gave me is not the guy that I want. Can I please have another try at this? It's like the only decision that he could have made for himself. And I think I came up with what the term I'm going to start calling them man miracles. These are the Manitowoc miracles that always seem to break in their favor in the court cases because they have a judge that's sympathetic or doesn't want to look at the facts.
Yeah, 100% correct. And remember, Len Kaczynski actually spoke to the media before he actually spoken to his own client, Brendan Dassey. And Len Kaczynski had made that comment about Stephen being evil incarnate, right? So hence, Len Kaczynski had already formed an opinion on Stephen's guilt or innocence, right? So hence, he also made a judgment call on Brendan before actually speaking to Brendan. That truly is remarkable.
I really wonder how much diving into the case and reading through stuff Lynn actually did. I mean, I get the feeling it's okay, I have to go to court today because, I mean, you hear Brendan say he hasn't even met with his lawyer. You have Barb on the phone with Brendan saying she can't even get Lynn to call her back. So, I mean, I get the feeling he really hasn't even looked into the case at all. I'll be at court, put me in front of the camera. Well, that's my thought.
Yeah, I agree with that, Denny. And the reason why he wanted to get in front of the camera is because his goal in life was to be elected judge. And he was going to use Brendan Dassey's confession and the utility of that in convicting Stephen Avery as a stepping stone in his political career. And that's probably why they substituted out the Hallbach distant relative to get Len in, is because they knew exactly that's what he was going to do. And why bother paying attention if all you have to do is write up this guilty plea?
Right. Didn't he just say, too, he finished third in a primary or something like that?
That's exactly
So
right.
he needed another stepping stone to push that boundary to get to the top.
100% correct, guys. And Len Kaczynski would have seen this as a very easy opportunity, right? Because he probably would have got the facts of the case probably from the state, right? Ken Kratz would have written a summary. And don't forget, you had that infamous press conference as well, right? So the way Ken Kratz presented it, everything looked really, really bad against Brendan. So Len Kaczynski was trying to come up with some type of scheme to do a plea deal, right? So he thought this is an easy case to go forward with, which of course had incredible tragic consequences for Brendan and his family, of course.
Avery family is hoping that the current lawyer or some lawyer simply will defend Brendan Dassey.
Investigators were after her since day one almost. How many times did they go after her? They pushed and pushed and pushed.
That's right, Cal.
So when did you get put in?
Tuesday.
he had court, I had to come to town too, and we passed him.
Mm-hmm. This is just contact, which you're not supposed to have.
Yeah. I'm trying not to. I don't want. I'm sick of this place.
I
got a good job, and I don't want to lose it.
That's good. Well, let's get you out of here. So you're going to call your PO today too?
Well, they told me I had to go see her.
Isn't that just showing you how desperate they were getting? Let's just break this down really quickly. She was in a vehicle that she wasn't driving, that she couldn't control. He was in a vehicle that he wasn't driving and that he couldn't control. They pass each other, they look at each other and smile, yet they violated the order. Excuse me, what?
It was that. Yeah, sorry, Big Jeff.
It is an abuse of power. There's no other way to describe this but an abuse of power, right? And it's worthy of investigation and people getting fired because it's clearly terrorizing somebody who's innocent.
Yep, it's essentially straight up intimidation, right? So
perfect word.
Yeah, what you do is you go after the weakest links, right? And they already know Jodi's record. They already know Jodi's vulnerabilities, and they're simply acting upon it. In fact, it got so bad that she really had to move away because no matter where she was, she would have been constantly harassed and intimidated and watched. It truly is quite shocking that it can happen.
I just think like looking forward to when she's finally run off, when they finally do succeed in getting her to run off. She makes all these negative statements about Stephen later on in the press or interviews as she did. And this is all part of it, the way I see it. The way I see it is like they just keep pushing and pushing and pushing until, just like they did to Brendan, until they get the answer they want.
That's true. That's true, Jeff. So in essence, what they did is they flipped Jodi, right? Jodi was always a supporter of Stephen, and Jodi used common sense to think, oh, wait a minute, how on earth can this rape and murder and mutilation take place? I spoke to him twice on the phone for 15 minutes. He sounded normal. So you go from a situation whereby Jodi supports Stephen to a point whereby now Jodi is saying, yeah, he's definitely a killer, he's a murderer, he's no good. And that all comes from the fact that Jodi was consistently harassed and discriminated against all the time, to the point where she goes, hey, if I keep on defending Stephen, I'm going to pay the consequences. So in effect, she played ball with law enforcement and completely flipped.
Hello? What did Jodi all say to you? She said you and her were done. So they stopped screwing with her? Yeah, that's what she said. So there ain't no me and her no more? So I might as well give it up then. The only thing I was hanging on to was her. That was the only thing keeping me together. I understand that. There's more fish in the sea too, though. I don't want nobody else. I want him to get married. I got nothing now.
Jeff, if I could just make the comment, I think this is all really an orchestrated part by the state to isolate Stephen Avery, basically get rid of all the people around him and to basically turn all the people that loved, I know that's a bit of a strong word, Stephen Avery, or was a supporter of Stephen Avery, to turn everyone against him, right? And the mere fact of that, his long-term plan was to marry Jody, right? Say the civil suit had worked out and the murder didn't take place. He wanted to marry Jody and leave Wisconsin or leave Manitowoc and, live happily ever after. And when your dreams are shattered in the manner that they were, now look at poor Stephen. He now feels very defeated by the mere fact that the person that he loved has now gone away. That's very devastating.
I just want to echo that a little bit. What I am about to say is sensitive of nature, and just be very aware of that. What I don't mean any disrespect, but I just want to kind of go there with that. It's almost like they wanted him to feel isolated. With isolation comes loss of hope, comes the rejection, and he was, or if they were listening to his calls early on, we all know that infamous phone call where we hear don't get strange now, because he was alluding to the fact that he was not going to go through this shit again, that there was an option for him, that he was in a dark place himself at that stage, and that he would rather that as an outcome than to live through all this shit again. It's almost like they're pushing him. They're getting rid of all he has left, so he gets even deeper and darker into those thoughts. Because if you're at that stage where you feel like you're defeated, Peterson said it. It would have been easier just to kill him. What a better way to get rid of Mr. Avery than to push him to the point that he does it himself for them. Again, a bit dark, but it's definitely crosses your mind when you realize how hard they were making it for him, and that knowing that that could have become an option for him. Because when you are down and out and the world feels like it's closing in and you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, it's very easy to stay there.
That's a very interesting comment, Kelly, because I believe that Stephen was actually on suicide watch as well, right? So isn't that very interesting? And you're correct. They basically pulled the rug underneath him. And remember, Stephen spent an additional 12 years in prison for something he didn't do. The mere fact that he is now back in prison again, that can destroy all hope. There's no doubt about it. They were essentially dismantling Stephen completely, isolating him, and anyone can understand that's going to cause severe depression in anyone.
I think one of the points of isolation that we were talking about is, if anything else, it makes you, it creates bad decisions, right? Stephen's going to make a bad decision, or he's going to get angry at a family member, or he's going to lash out on the phone and change a detail about his story that makes him look guilty. And so I think it is part of this full court press against Stephen Avery.
Needless to say, it was a surprise to me when the letter got written. Essentially, this is an alibi saying, I wasn't there when the homicide took place. I was at home. It says, hello, I was going to write you a while back, but I didn't have a pencil. Truth is, me and my brother Blaine came home from school at 3:45, walked down the road, and he played PlayStation until his mom came home between 5 and 5:30. And he claims he got a call at 6 o'clock from Blaine's boss. Told him that Blaine went trick-or-treating, watched more TV till 7 o'clock when he got a call from Steve Avery, and then which he characterizes as an invitation to go to the bonfire. And then they drove the golf cart around his mother's yard to find garbage and put a bunch of junk in the fire that night. And that's basically what happened. I went home, went to bed, got some sleep. Barb Yondas admitted she's the one that, encouraged Brendan to write the letter. Why she did that, I don't know. It just seems dumb. What is understandable is that if Brendan was going to be a witness at Steve Avery's trial, each and every statement he gave that was inconsistent with what he told the police on March 1 or on May 13th would be beneficial to Steve Avery.
Jeff, can I just poll our panel here? Does anybody else feel that letter that he wrote to the judge is a lot like his first draft that he wrote for O'Kelly?
100%
Just
correct.
simple. This is what happened.
I think it's exactly like it.
In actual fact, Denny, you can actually go one step back. That's exactly what he told Detective O'Neill at Crivets. The
Correct.
same simple, boring story. Me and my brother got off the bus at 3:45. We walked down the gravel road. We went home. And my brother went on the phone, and I played computer games. I got a phone call later on to go over to Stevens, which is very, very interesting because it meant that Brendan's story was consistent from the word go. Unfortunately, he changed his recollections because he was told that he was lying and that he was holding things back. So when he got manipulated and changed his recollections, he was then told that, no, your recollections can't be right because the timing is all wrong. So the poor kid is trying to change and adapt, and yet they're telling him that he's wrong again. So he's completely lost and at sea. I think it was a real bold move, and kudos for Brendan for writing that letter to the judge.
Thank goodness he was able to find a pencil, huh? Can you imagine that right to a judge? I was going to write this a while ago, but I couldn't find a pencil.
Straight from Jean Couchet. Straight from Jean Couchet.
Well, and good on Barb for encouraging him to take that next step too.
Yeah, and shame on Len for saying it was dumb.
Right. Is it because he didn't have O'Kelly there to say, well, what's missing from this letter?
Right.
But I suppose in a way, Len's probably internally embarrassed in the fact that this should have been his own job. Hey, Brendan, I believe in your innocence. Let's write this letter. Let's do this. Let's do that. And how ridiculous is it for Len Kaczynski to say, well, had Brendan been caught up in Stephen's trial, then all the statements that he had made, potentially could have been contradicted and it would have looked good for Steve. Hello? Isn't that your job to pick apart Brendan, your client's testimony to say, Brendan, none of this makes any sense? So here's a classic case of an attorney leaving his own client out to the wolves. Shocking.
I mean, I think even more, it identifies that he's more concerned with Stephen Avery's guilt than he is concerned with his own client's innocence. That's what I see.
That's 100% correct. And it also echoes what Brendan has constantly said. When Brendan said he believed, he got convinced by Fassbender and Wiegert that Stephen had murdered Teresa Halbach, but Brendan was not there. That's why Brendan said some of it, right? Because he got convinced in his mind that Stephen had committed this crime, right? So, he's now recanting, saying, I'm sorry, but I didn't do any of this. And that really, really pissed off Len, Michael O'Kelly, and also, of course, Mr. Kratz himself.
So I think she probably knows that. P.S. Me and my mom think you were a good judge. Thank you for your time. It's contained in the letter.
He's a learning disabled 16-year-old who's not equipped to face the trouble in which he finds himself and isn't getting much help. In my view. It's just whatever his personal failings here, there have been a series of systemic failings that are deeply troubling if you think about them too much or take them personally. You know, I'm not sure that I'm doing fully what I should be doing when I'm worrying about whether other people who are not in my charge are being ground up and spit out by this system.
You know, he does make a point where, you know, it's not his responsibility to worry about another case. However, the fact that they're so closely tied and the fact that Brendan had no resources, I know hindsight is 2020, but the Brendan Dassey case seems to be the much weaker case. Put it that way.
You can just see how, with him talking, how just the way that Lynn is handling the case, how much it is affecting the moral and ethic belief of Dean, and how Lynn just is not doing his job. And you almost get the sense that he's like, I wish I could have this case.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but wasn't the initial intention that one of these attorneys, either Strang or Buting, was actually going to represent Brendan? I think there was talk of it.
That they were going to leave Stephen's case and go on to Brendan's?
No, initially, one of them were going to take up Stephen's case, and the other one was going to take up Brendan's case. I remember.
I think you're correct. I think Dean said he would do it, but that was only if Buting would be okay with it, because Buting would have to step up and take the main role in Stephen's case.
Yep. You definitely needed at least two attorneys to handle Stephen's case, maybe even three, because it's so big.
Right.
Are being treated unjustly. I need to worry about whether Stephen is sort of single-mindedly about that, I think, in some way.
Yes, can we help you?
Hi, here to see Stephen Avery.
Oh, okay, you just have a seat, please. I'll find what else.
Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is it on? Do you feel he's had adequate representation to this point?
I think he has, yes. I think the steps we took were reasonable. I respectfully disagree with the judge.
Yeah, you're still saying it wasn't a mistake to let him be interviewed with just your investigator you do that over again?
Well, I wouldn't do it over again because of all this. But I think in the final analysis, the issue of the May 13th statement probably will never come up in Brendan's case again. The state most likely is not going to use it.
Excellent.
Most likely is not going to use it.
Yep, their entire plan completely fell apart. Kratz knew it. I mean, we know how the story goes, guys. Kratz had spoken with O'Kelly and also with Len Kaczynski, and what they wanted to do on that particular interview was Brendan to essentially write a 1 or 2 page summary of the events that took place on Halloween, and they wanted to present that as a confession to the judge, and hence do a plea deal with Brendan, give him 15 years or wherever it was, which is ironical because had Brendan gone with that plea deal, he would have been out now, right? But as his grandfather and his own mother and many other people have said, Brendan, why would you admit to something that you didn't do, right? Which, you got to swallow that bitter pill. But if you haven't committed a crime, there's no point in admitting it to it. For a start, he would be labeled as a sex offender and has to be on a sex offender list for the rest of his life. And how can you walk through society and live with yourself admitting to a crime that you never did, right? So it's horrendous. And the mere fact that this stuffed up the plans meant that the state could, under no circumstances, allow Brendan to testify. Because if Brendan took the stand, the very likes of Strang and Buting would have ripped apart the entire coerced confession of Brendan. They would have pulled out and shown all the flaws to say, look, there's no evidence for any of this taking place. And that indeed would have enhanced Stephen's case. There's no way that Kratz was going to ever go to that risk. So hence, they had 2 trials. Now, guys, how ridiculous is this? 1 victim, 2 murder scenarios, and the state got away with it.
I mean, it literally should not be allowed that you have 2 different narratives from the state performing the same crime. I mean, we're gonna see it later on when Kratz said there was only 1 person who could have done this, right? But when we get to Brendan, it's 2 people. It doesn't make any sense. Brendan's whole case, there's no forensic evidence against Brendan, as you've said over and over again, and it's just wrong that they should be allowed to use 2 narratives to convict people of the same crime.
It's another miracle.
That's correct. And the mere factor that if you go through Brendan Dassey's trial, right, 99.99% is an exact carbon copy of what happened in Stephen's trial, right? Because they had to bring in all the experts to talk about all the evidence. But there was one unfortunate thing. They could tie none of that evidence that was against Stephen to Brendan Dassey. That was the problem. So that poor kid got convicted by words and words alone.
It's hard. I'm in here by myself. I can't talk to nobody. I can't even talk to the lawyer over the phone. It's been recorded. At least this lawyer is good, and he's doing his job, and he's trying to figure out who did this and everything else. I don't know how he's gonna do it, but I guess he's pretty smart, so he'll know what to do.
Sheriff Peterson was the arresting officer of Avery in 1985. He's now the head of that office. And clearly has the strong dislike for Avery. If the very top guy has this kind of attitude about Avery and that kind of personal involvement in the case of Avery, that's going to permeate the department, the whole department. If not, at least it's going to permeate the upper echelon that's close to him. And that would include the lieutenants and the sergeants. So we looked around, and one guy's name just kept coming up over and over and over every place we looked at critical moments. And that was Lieutenant James Link. Link is the guy who finds the key in the bedroom on the 7th entry, supposedly in plain view. Link is deposed just 3 weeks before this Hallbach disappearance. And then, most peculiar of all, is when we looked in Stephen's old 1985 case file in the clerk's office. Some items from that court file ultimately proved to exonerate Stephen. Interestingly enough, the transmittal form that goes with the evidence in 2002 to the crime lab is filled out by none other than, at that time, Detective Sergeant James Link. And I said to myself, whoa, this is starting to sound more than just coincidental.
Okay, before we move on, and I almost want to back the video up before you got let the horses off to the race here. Let's talk a little bit about this Link issue and how he keeps popping up, and he's the one that passed the evidence. He was in charge of the evidence in the 1985 case, and before I just want to make one comment. With the Netflix Colburn, this documentary names Link, not Colburn here, right? They didn't say and whose name keeps popping up. They said Link, not Colburn. So I just think that that's relevant in that case as well as we move forward to talk about that Colburn versus Netflix case, where it seems like, does Colburn really have a case? Because what we just saw presents it in a different officer is kind of being looked at instead of him. Any comments?
Did they not talk about item FL in MAM1? Am I? It's been a while. Do we have to wait for MAM2 to talk about FL?
I think a lot of the discussion of item FL is in MAM2, but I do believe in MAM1 they talk about the bullet. Correct.
They talk, and so ironic that they wait to talk about Link, because there is one person in the search of the Dassey garage who forgot to sign in when they did that search, and what he did was he brought sandwiches to everybody who was searching the garage, and magically after he showed up, brought everybody sandwiches, forgot to sign in, had to be reminded. Guess what's discovered in the Dassey garage after Link shows up? So he does miraculously show up everywhere, doesn't he, Dr. Sultan?
Link is everywhere, and that's ironically they used to call him the Link Man, right? Instead of the Link Man.
Another word is key, right? Key and link, right? These things go together.
Correct. That's 100% correct. Now, I might be talking at a turn here, but there's no doubt that both Link and Colburn are total devotees to the Sheriff Peterson and the so-called thin blue line. There's no way that Link and Colburn are going to have any form of sensitivities or any type of devotion per se to Stephen's cause, right? They toe the line. Link and Colburn, they're individuals that will definitely toe the line. They will do what has to be done, put it that way. And you're correct. It's rather bizarre, right? Even though they were officers that were deposed, They're the ones that are finding key forensic evidence all over the place. That in itself is very, very suspicious.
Well, as you put it before, Dr. Silkman, key fucking forensic evidence.
And yeah, but not only that, these guys are in a prime position to plant forensic evidence, right? Or to find planted forensic evidence, right? Because they kept on going into that trailer all the time. They couldn't find anything of significance. And they kept on being told to go inside the trailer and keep on looking for items of interest, right? So it's rather bizarre that despite extensive searches like Big Jeff has alluded to, nothing of significance was found. And boom, who should be in the same room when the key is found? Lenk and Colburn, who both are MTSO officers and who were both recently deposed in Stephen Avery's civil suit trial, and both knew about that phone call. I think it was in 1995 or 1996 when Gregory Allen was arrested, right? So they are all intimately involved.
I thought there was a big box.
I thought it was going to be in the big box too. I didn't.
My understanding is that is it. The other items were fingernail scrapings and hair.
This is Jerry Buting. Is Dean available?
Okay, there's the date 3/13/96.
On the red tape, or yeah.
Yeah, but we don't know who put this piece of Scotch tape over this.
Right.
No, I don't want to leave him. It's very, very important. I talked to him. Can you see if somebody can hunt him down?
Okay.
Bring it out. Spin it around. Looks like it's cut through, doesn't it?
Let me tell you, this is a red letter day for the defense. It could not have been better. The seal was clearly broken on the outside of the box, and inside the box is a styrofoam kit. The seal is broken in that. We pulled the styrofoam halves apart, and there, in all of its glory, was a test tube that said Stephen Avery, inmate number, everything on it. The blood is liquid. And get this, right in the center of the top of the tube is a little tiny hole, just about the size of a hypodermic needle. Yes. And I spoke with a LabCorp person already who told me they don't do that. Have you fallen on the floor yet or no? Think about it, Dean. If LabCorp didn't stick the needle through the top, then who did? Some officer went into that file, opened it up, took a sample of Stephen Avery's blood and planted it in the RAV4. Yeah, he knows where we're going. Game on. Exactly. Game on.
Oh, Jesus. Kelly, Kelly, you want to lead the discussion in this?
Well, I'm sitting here right now with my EDTA purple top blood tube in my hand right now. So guess what? My blood's been in this since the 18th of December of 2020, and it is still liquid form. Ready to start, honestly. I will say one thing. In my own tube right now, where he talks about the hole going into it where you would put the needle in, you do. That's where you put the blood in. So you put the needle in it and it goes through that rubber suction and then you put the blood through it. I will be honest with you guys right now. Mine, you cannot see a hole. I'm going to be honest with you. I will share a photo, but you cannot see a hole. But I know a hole went into it. Not just once when they did it, when we first originally did it, but I have used it in my experiment several times by inserting other needles into it to get blood out in my experiments, and it still has not left a hole to that magnitude that we see in Making a Murderer. So could it be different rubbers, like the rubber format of the EDTA tube itself? Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, I just wanted to touch base on that. You cannot see the hole in my one, and I've used it over and over again in my experiments, and you still cannot see it. Now, here's the thing about the this vial. Right now, it's a hard one because I think we all can talk this vial to we all go blue in the face. Unfortunately, you can only say so much now because in Kathleen's own narrative, she's ruled it out. So is it really even significant anymore? That's the problem I now look at it. I will just say this though. Carla found something very interesting. Could it mean absolutely nothing? Of course, this is speculation, but it's something that I wish that the boys, Dean and Jerry, had when they first went into the argument of this vial, because I think this could have caused reasonable doubt to a degree if they played it properly in court. It's a phone call, as an MTSO radio call that she found. It's was on the morning of the 6th of the 11th at 4:53 in the morning. So the RAV at this stage is in the lab. It's unattended. It's no one's opened it. Allegedly, it's still locked. We have a phone call from Rob Herman asking his brother Todd, can you get into the administration block? And that he's trying to get into the office, but they can't get past a door. We all know now, this is where it goes to speculation, because we're looking at Man 1 here, and they're talking about an administration block. There's a blood sample left just there behind a locked door. And here they are, hours before the blood is found in the RAV, talking about trying to get in behind this locked door. Coincidence? Absolutely could be a coincidence. It could have absolutely nothing to do with the blood. But I just think it's a really interesting call when you kind of put it together, because when you really listen to it, and she does break it down like she transcribed it, and you hear them, they already know what they're talking about. They go, oh, can you get into the he's like, oh, no, it's locked. So they've already had a discussion what it is that they're going there for. They end up saying at the end, oh, I'll have to go grab a credit card. Of course, my head went to, oh, a credit card. Were they using it to jimmy the door open? Absolutely, probably not. It looks like, when we've all looked at the door itself now, I think it's more of a keypad lock as well as an actual key lock. But again, it's something that you could start this conversation off with and then go from here. Everyone go listen to the call, have a listen to it, see what you think. I'll send it to Jeff Jones so you can add it to the description at the bottom, so then everyone can know where to go straight forward. But yeah, where do we start with this? Where do you start? There's so much to break down.
I got a question then. If you, how do we explain the hole then? How do you explain that at the end of the vial? What do we? I mean,
the actual hole at the end of the vial is completely normal. I've had my blood taken many times in purple top tubes. Basically, that purple top tube is known as a vacutainer. So essentially, the air has all been removed in that tube. That's how they're manufactured. And you have a rubber stopper placed on top of the tube. So what happens is, when you give blood, the actual purple top tube is placed in a two-pronged device. One needle goes inside the purple top tube. The other needle goes inside your vein. So the phlebologist the person who takes your blood, as soon as the vein is pierced, because the tube is under vacuum, the blood flows into the vial, and it takes up a specific volume of blood inside the vial. So the presence of that hole in the purple top tube is 100% normal. And I do agree with Kelly. You can actually, if you have a look at the top of the vial, you can actually see what appears to be like blood, whereas Kelly's vial is essentially all sealed. Remember, that tube is from 1996. It's actually quite old. It's many, many years old. Over time, probably the rubber would sort of like potentially break down. Now, I spoke to a phlebologist, someone who had taken my blood, and I asked them, how long do the purple top tubes actually last for? She said basically the blood can be frozen, but normally they like to use the tubes within 6 months. So they have a certain amount of lifespan. So quite clearly, the mere factor that you've got a purple top tube sitting in the clerk's office is very unusual for that period of time. And you can clearly see the finding of that purple top tube really rattled Norm Garn and Uyghur. In fact, Norm Garn said to Buting, well, this is now a game changer, isn't it?
Dr. Silkman, I wonder if you would mind taking a second to explain to the audience how much blood was found in the RAB and how much volume does that how does that compare to the volume of blood that's in that tube right there?
All right, and now that the amount of blood allegedly belonging to Stephen was definitely under a mil. So if you work it out by volume, 1 droplet of blood is approximately 50 microliters. It's a very, very small amount of blood. Now, if there were 6 drops of blood altogether, even if you double it, you're looking at around about 600 microliters. That's less than 1 mil of blood. Such a tiny amount of blood. Now, in a blood vial, you normally collect around about 10 mils of blood. The FBI estimated the volume of the blood that was left. There was about 5.5 mils of blood left. Could you take out 600 microliters and no one noticing it? Absolutely. Now, the important thing, if I was a planter, that's exactly where I would take the blood from. The reason why you would want to do that is because the blood, A, is in liquid form, and 2, most importantly, you absolutely know that it comes from Stephen Avery. So that blood comes from Stephen Avery. It's got his name on it, right? So if you're going to do any planting, personally, that's where I would have taken it from. But yeah, the amount of blood that belongs to Stephen in that RAV is tiny, a very small amount of blood. You could have placed the amount of blood in an Eppendorf tube, slipped it in your pocket. Absolutely no one's going to know that you've got it. Use a dropper. You can reproduce everything that you saw in that RAV very, very quickly. Probably take you about 2 minutes to do it, if that.
I just want to say that when I was doing my experiments, for me to be able to create all 6 drops, it took me 1/10 of a mil. That's it. That's all I needed. 1 mil, and I was create everything we see in the RAV.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. So if you so 0.1 of a mil. So it goes to show that you need very, very little blood in order to reproduce what you see in that RAV. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, so I guess my comment on this is I think a lot of people are dissuaded from the blood vial theory based on the fact that it was essentially abandoned out in the open by Kathleen Zellner. And I think that Zellner has abandoned a couple of theories, right? I mean, at one point, she quote unquote exonerated the police of planting evidence, right? I think that she has strategic reasons for openly saying things like this. She doesn't want to get into a fight with the FBI about the EDTA. I really do think that, even though she might believe in her heart of hearts that the blood in the RAV came from this very vial, and that it was quite technically feasible to do it, as we've just heard from someone with a PhD in microbiology, and someone who's actually conducted an experiment firsthand with herself with her own blood, then that this is doable. But she has a public and sort of a private battle to fight here, and I don't think that she is very interested in picking some of these fights, at least out in the public. And for example, even after saying that she exonerated the cops of I think planting the blood or something like that, she did say in her most recent brief, from the one that was rejected, that Wiegert and Fassbender essentially took the groin swab of Stephen Avery and swapped that in for the Hoodlash swab. Yeah.
Correct.
Whatever battle she's trying to fight in public, and whatever, I think with the level of corruption in Wisconsin, she doesn't necessarily think she's going to get anywhere by openly accusing the police or the FBI or law enforcement. So I think that's where she's going with that. Frankly, I don't know where they came from. I don't know whether it was the blood on the RAV was reconstituted blood from the Grand Am, or whether it came from that vial. I frankly, I don't trust anything they say. It's just too easy to manipulate, and that's my comment on the vial.
But yeah, personally, I haven't given up on the blood vial theory. I don't believe the blood that we see in the RAV came from the sink at all. Kelly will tell you, Kelly has done a lot of phenomenally great work doing experiments and trying to reproduce what we see in the RAV. That blood was definitely in a liquefied form. It wasn't blood that's reconstituted. The incredible thing about blood that's been treated with EDTA is that you stop coagulation. So the blood is still very much in liquefied form. Now, remember, you want to give an impression that that blood is Stephen Avery's. There's only one person who sampled that blood, and that was Cherie Cohane. So according to Cherie Cohane, the blood that you see is Stephen Avery's blood. You can easily fool everyone by swapping the swabs, right? The FBI did not re-swab the RAV4 de novo. They simply accepted the swabs from the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, and they did their EDTA testing, right? So therefore, you can easily get back negative results, because if you swap the swabs, you're not going to know. And I think Kelly and everybody else will agree. What was essential, especially for the defense, was to re-swab the RAV de novo, right? Forget about what Cohane found. Re-swab the RAV de novo and re-extract the DNA and prove that that genomic DNA is in fact from Stephen, right? The blood vial is too tempting, right? Because you know that the blood is in liquefied form and it's got Stephen Avery's name on it. That blood vial was used in 1996 by LabCorp. They obviously opened the top. They took out several mils of blood and they extracted genomic DNA from that blood. I've done probably about 100 or 200 genomic DNA extractions from blood, right? So it's very easy to do. You don't put a needle, you would never put a needle in that purple top and remove blood. Kelly, do you agree with me?
I agree that you can. I've popped open the lid numerous times. It absolutely nothing. Once I pop the lid, and I'm not going to even make a joke of this, but it is a bit of a running joke, but when I popped it, flakes fell because it had like all the dry
Correct.
blood from around the inner of the cap from where the vacuum rubber seal had sat. It must
Correct.
have had like liquid and had dried. So when I popped it over my white bench, I think this one's actually recorded. You see it like these little flakes drop when the cap comes off. So yes, you don't need to put the needle back in. The only reason why I did the needle thing a few times in my experiment was purely just to show that it can be done, but that's not probably the way they would have done it. It's just as simple as, listen, pop. Oh God, it stinks. Dead blood. I literally just popped the lid.
Yes. So I mean, the thing is this, guys. As scientists in the laboratory, you're taught, don't use needles at any cost, because the reason by using needles is that it's very likely you're going to stab yourself. So you would never put a needle in a purple top tube to extract blood from it. You simply pop open the lid, and you use either a glass or plastic pipette in order to take out the volume of blood that you need. You would never put in a needle to take out blood. So LabCorp would have simply popped the top, taken out probably 3 or 4 mils of blood, extracted genomic DNA from that, put the top back on, and away you go. And as Kelly alluded to, the reason why you get the flakes is because as soon as you break open the seal, you let in oxygen, right? So the blood now is no longer under vacuum. You break the vacuum seal.
I think you bring up a really interesting point there for me that's just kind of rattling around. Number one, Buting says an officer came in and took this out. It doesn't have to be an officer. First off, I just kind of want to clarify that. It could be just someone. But the way you're describing this, Dr. Silkman, you're saying that you're trained not to use a syringe in that case. Yet
Correct.
So it looks like someone might have. So which makes me that lead to be someone who doesn't have medical training may have done that.
You got to be pretty desperate. You got to be pretty desperate to use a needle. But I must admit, the advantage of using a needle is that it's quick. And not only that, you now have a vessel to contain the blood in, right? So if you go in with a needle, you can extract, say, 1 ml of blood, put on the cap on the needle, bang, all clean, right? And I just want to make the point, the reason why that tape was actually cut was, I believe it was someone from the Innocence Project, and they actually initialed it on the outside of the box. So the mere fact that the tape was actually cut, there's a legitimate reason. But what they should have done, of course, is to reseal it with evidence tape. They never did. They just put Scotch tape on top. That was a big mistake.
Well, it's also points like that what would build up to conspirators. You are people who are conspiracy theorists, and that lends itself to that. When there's mistakes made that look bad, this is why things need to be done correctly.
100%, and that's why Ken Kratz went to town with the blood vial, right? Because we're reading his book, of course, and he absolutely went to town about all the so-called conspiracy theories about the blood vial, the fact that it's got a hole in the top, etc., etc. And you're correct, Jeff. If you're going to do procedures, it has to be 100%. And Buting, I believe, wrote in his book or somewhere that he now regrets being on camera when he called it, that special red letter day. That was a mistake on his behalf.
Excuse me. I just wanted to say, just going back to what Big Jeff was saying at the beginning, I absolutely agree with that with Kathleen. Although she has done allegedly a bit more experiments now and had the blood aged and stuff, when you go back and listen to her, I think it was even in MAM 2, and then she has said it further on in future from MAM 2 future interviews, she says very clearly, I went into this thinking I could get experts to come in, go after that vial and prove 100% it came from that vial, because she went in there believing it herself, that it came from the vial. It makes the most sense, rah, rah, rah. She then says, I was told as we were going through it, I was told there is no testing for it, that you're going to be able to prove it one way or the other. You have to let it go. Then there's that moment where they ask her, what's going to happen if it comes back like fresh blood? And she even says, well, boy, aren't I going to have a bit of a problem? And then we see in, I think, the 2017 motion, in a foot lock, like a foot header in one of her motions, she actually says, we weren't able to do any more of the testing to age the blood because it wasn't sufficient enough DNA or blood to be able to extract for samples. So it was void. We stopped it. So we don't have a conclusion. A lot of people are going on about that now, saying, hang on a minute, she made it very clear that she never even did these tests because there wasn't enough to test. How is it all of a sudden she was able to now do it? In fairness, she had made that statement, I think, in 2017. It's now 2021 when she later said that she had done it again. Technology changes. It keeps advancing every year. So maybe they went back and did it again and tried again. So she could be like, I don't think she's lying and saying that she has now got these results if she hasn't had it done. The problem that people are saying is, we just hope that she didn't do it back then and then she withheld those results, versus she has redone them again later, and then we can provide proof that when the actual test was redone. So I just want to echo that I agree with Big Jeff on that. I think sometimes she was backed into a corner and realized, it's not that I don't believe that Beauty and Strang were onto something. It's just that they did it already. It didn't work. I have to move on from it because there's nothing else I can add to it. I was told that by the experts. The only thing I have left now is the sink. Sink is something I can work with. Do I think it personally came from the sink? No. Do I think it's plausible? No. Is it possible? Meh. I can't say it's not possible, but I just don't. I think with all the factors that come around it, I think she's going to struggle to push that, especially if the state brings in other experts that would contradict some of the things that even I found with the sink theory being possible with all these variables that you have to take into consideration. I think she will have a hard way of crossing that over the line. But in fairness, I think that if she was to go with the sink theory alone wouldn't work. But if she's using it in a Denny and she's using other clusters of circumstances to kind of make it a story, it could push it over that fine line that I'm thinking that she's not reaching at the moment. But I say this like theoretically, because the problem we have right now is there's not even point talking about her being able to do that, because her first line of bar is getting hurt in a court. That's just jumping the gun by going that far into it. But for me, the problem is right now, will any judge right now consider that Stephen Avery was framed by a Denny suspect? Is that enough to warrant an evidentiary hearing? Because that's where we're at. Not where did it come from, is will any judge believe that? I don't want to go too far into this because it's so much to break down and we're already 1 hour and 35 minutes in. I just wanted to go back to what Big Jeff said. I think that's a very fair statement that he mentioned.
Let's kind of open it up to anybody who, maybe Denny, if you had any closing comments, or we should let Big Jeff go first on closing comments or something. And just overall, like where we're at in the narrative, this is episode 10. So it's kind of a milestone for us. We got through 10 weeks down. And so Big Jeff, do you have any?
Well, I think it's been, where that puts us about halfway through. I think there is more evidence yet to discuss, and it doesn't go very well for Stephen and Brendan, as we know, and it's just incumbent upon us to continue to point out the flaws and corruption of the state and this injustice that was done to Stephen, and especially poor Brendan, who to me so obviously had nothing to do with this, and it really is a crime against humanity that he's still in jail, as we know, and it's just incumbent upon us to continue to point out the flaws and corruption of the state and this injustice that was done to Stephen, and especially poor Brendan, who to me so obviously had nothing to do with this, and it really is a crime against humanity that he's still in jail.
Denny, you got any comments for us today?
Oh, there's going to be fun in our next episode, I can tell you that, because they really talk about this blood vial, so fasten your seatbelt. Other than that, I mean, looking back at what we just watched with a lawyer that wasn't doing his job, didn't even have interest in doing his job, in my opinion. I mean, to sit here and wonder why things happen the way they happened, I'm at a loss for words. I mean, a lawyer is supposed to work for you, and yet he was siding with the state. It's asinine.
Dr. Soakman, you got anything for us today? Wrap up comments or?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Denny said. It truly is disgusting. With hindsight, how we saw the strategies that were in place against Brendan, and it truly is shocking when your own attorney or attorneys go against you and they believe in your guilt. Believe me, guys, it's all downhill from here, right? Nothing good is going to come out of it if your own attorney believes that you're guilty. And we saw that the way it precipitated out at the end for Brendan. And it goes to show that you need to put your best foot forward right at the start. You want everything to run smoothly. For Brendan, absolutely nothing ran smoothly. And the other point I want to make is that, it's fantastic that Denny has joined us, and hopefully he'll come on further discussions with the panel. It's great to get other people's opinions. But also, I just want to point out how lucky we are that Kelly has, she's a nurse in the medical industry, and she's done a lot of top-notch research with her own blood. And we are thankful because now we can discuss, as Denny said, all the information regarding the blood vial, and we have to be absolutely honest in terms of the significance or otherwise of that blood vial. Because trust me, the guilters throw that blood vial in our face all the time. So honesty, when mistakes are made, you have to man up, you have to admit it. But boy, I'm looking forward to the upcoming episodes. Thank you so much, guys.
And Cal, did you have wrap-up comments?
There's not really much I can say that the guys haven't. Thanks, Denny, for joining. I hope you enjoyed it. It's really awesome to have other people's perspectives come into it. It's good to bounce off each other. I think it's really healthy. Again, I think now we're getting more into the evidence base of the case. I think it gets more intense and more exciting because everyone's got like their strengths in it. So it's good to have us all come together and talk about it and bring to the table what we've got. The blood, obviously, as you all know, yes, I've done years, and I'm going to say years now, of experimenting with it. It's definitely to me the biggest part of the case. That blood in the RAV, you can almost take away everything. And that RAV, like Dr. Silkman said, the guilters throw it in our faces all the time. They always come back to that blood because they can go, so what? Maybe the key was planted, and they all like mimic what Ken says. they'll say, okay, maybe the item FL didn't go through her head, but it went through her body. Either way, she was on it. So what? But that blood, they all can't get their head around that it was planted. For them, it was the blood in the rag is what puts Stephen as guilty. So I think, as we move forward, it's gonna just it just highlights how important this case is where we're at now. It's DNA that got him out, and it's DNA that's keeping him in. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, so yeah, that is the completion of episode 4, which was titled Indefensible. And so I just want to say thanks again to the panel. Thanks, Denny, for joining us. Thanks to everybody who's been listening every week, and the feedback has been great. Really appreciate it. If you haven't yet, hit that like and subscribe button and the bell so you get all the notifications. And this has been Discussing a Murderer.